Why UConn's new guard core might be better than ever and reloaded for a title run. You're on the Hoops Cap.
Let's get it, let's get it, let's get it, let's get it, let's get it. Yeah. UConn, baby. Home of the champions. Let's go.
Welcome into the Hoops Cap Pod. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto. You can find me at Mark Zanetto CBB. Let's fix this real quick here. Look, this UConn team this year, in order for us to be prepared for 25-26, we have to take a step back and look at what UConn had to do to essentially not necessarily prove to their fan base, because this is a team that was a couple points away from at least being in a Sweet 16, probably wasn't a national title contender to that respect, but they did take the new champion Florida Gators to the brink and pretty much had control of that game. That was more about Dan Hurley and his ability to scheme than it was the type of players and the talent that was on this team. So the story of UConn's 24-25 season really wasn't about as much about adjusting. It was about understanding coming off of back-to-back titles, losing 5 NBA players, the rookie of the year in Steph Castle, the most impactful player in college basketball of the last 10 years, so to speak, in Donovan Clingan, titles in his first 2 years. From 2 years ago, losing someone like Adama Sanogo, to just the back-to-back title, losing a Cam Spencer, that edge, the Tristan Newtons. That's where you start. You know, like when it made me laugh whenever I would do a segment with a college basketball coach like a Seth Greenberg or a scout like Adam Finkelstein for 24/7. When you would ask that, like, what's wrong with UConn? Like, what's going on with this team that had a lot of high expectations, of which Dan and his staff put on this team to potentially three-peat? Well, you start with losing 5 players that were phenomenal. Well, yeah, but they lost 5 players the year before, but they didn't replace that talent with equally as talented players. You replace them with good players, but not necessarily championship quality players. And you kind of made bets, right? Sometimes bets hit, sometimes they don't. And a lot of times when you double down, you can lose big. And for quite a few moments in this past UConn season, Dan Hurley and his staff lost some big bets, right? One right out of the gate was Mahaney. He showed a lot of flashes, like even in the beginning when we played against Rhode Island in the exhibition, albeit against an A-10 team, he really showed the wiggle, the ability to get downhill that they were hoping for all season. Had 17 points. You saw some glimpses of a guy like Nowell, who ended up transferring. And also, it provided a look of what this team likely wanted to be the whole year, which was having Hassan Diarra, who was coming off the bench, sprinkling in some Nowell, not relying so much on Liam McNeely to be your primary scorer as a freshman. Now, when you're watching that closely, you know that once we got into the wars of, Maui, of, Big East play, Mahaney wasn't the answer. They tried to take a square peg and fit it into a round hole and make him into a hybrid Tristan Newton / Cam Spencer, and that just was never his comfort. He wasn't comfortable doing that. Let's just be honest, right? And also, I also want to be mindful of the fact that these are still human beings. Like, I get a lot of shit sometimes because people will say, well, you're just a big time homer. You're right. Part of this UConn love and fascination with this team is I have a deep emotional connection to the state of Connecticut, UConn as a whole. So when a player decides, paid or not paid, to come to Connecticut, to come to Stores, to lay it on the line for us as a fan base, I'm not going to kill them unless they do something to kill us, right? If Mahaney or Nowell on their way out, flipped everybody the bird and said it was the worst place I've ever been and blah, 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 then, that opens you up to a little more criticism. But these guys are model citizens. There were some issues with Nowell's dad and, people going after him, but that's not Ahmad. Ahmad was a great kid. He did our show when I was at Locked On. He was phenomenal. Haas was the consummate professional. Someone like Sampson, who was just a phenomenal player, but had his ups and downs. It wasn't the quintessential championship Dan Hurley team of the last couple of years, but what it was a genuinely UConn team. And if you're an older fan, you know what I mean. You had your guys who were grinders. You had guys who probably drove you nuts. You had guys who were like, man, if he could just put it all together, he could be phenomenal. We've had plenty of seasons like that. And now that we have a coaching staff that's entrenched in Dan Hurley and the boys, I never feel like we're far away from competing for a national title. Because even last year, if you took that Florida game and said, hey, we're going to beat that team, do you not think that UConn's in the Final Four with what they had in front of them? I think the answer to that is yes. So this team had Final Four spurtability when they won 8 games in a row after Maui. They had the talent. They didn't have what I would consider the classic consistency and the depth that you could plug people in from off the bench and not see that much of a drop-off. These guys were banged up and they were undermanned, and they almost got it done. So, there was nothing wrong with these players. It just weren't going to get you to the promised land. But next year, the year that's coming in, the 25-26 season, we have what Dan has called a monster class. And I think this new guard backcourt with some, obviously, folks sticking around like Solo is just going to be a phenomenal, if not the best in the country, from top to bottom. I'm talking the entire backcourt, not just Solo and Silas, not just Malachi and Silas, but when you add Braylon Mullins, when you add Alec Millender, when you add Jacob Furphy, who's listed as a guard for this UConn team, size, depth, experience, speed, power, All-Americans, Mr. Indiana basketball in Braylon Mullins, who's going to be the next one and done for this talented UConn squad. So we're going to get into that and break out this new core 4, if you will, with the new additions to this UConn team that I think we're all super excited for games to start with. And we're going to talk about that coming up after the break.
Big East Energy. Ryan Gresh here with the Feel Good Lab. And the same tools that we use to help elite athletes like Hassan Diarra, Nika Mule, and our very own Cam Spencer are the same things that we use to help people like you and I. People that want to optimize their overall health, feel a little bit younger, or are suffering from a chronic condition. And it's all about reducing inflammation, improving the nutrients in our body, and fixing our gut. And the way that we do that is not through a one-size-fits-all model. Everything is personalized. We offer products that are plant-based, natural, and help you identify the root cause. And oftentimes, we're looking at what's going into our body. So we have a food inflammation test, a gut microbiome test, so that we can treat you like an individual human that you are. And so the thing that we're the most excited about is actually connecting with you. Whether you're a UConn fan or not, please reach out, call us. We'd love to talk with you and see how we can help. Best in health.
That's Ryan Gresh with the Feel Good Lab. If you need anything from him, make sure you check that out. It is Big East Energy for 15% off at checkout at thefeelgoodlab.com. Okay. When I talk about the reset, I am talking about this new core. Silas, Solo, and Malachi with... And let's start with Silas first. Silas Damari Jr., 6'5", two-way guard out of Georgia with 70 games of SEC experience. Damari joins UConn with legit credentials. This was a guy who, I'll be the first to admit, when I first, because I watch SEC basketball. I watch former Pac-12 basketball, which is now Utah State, so it's Mountain West. I'm a basketball junkie, so it's not just Big East play. So I watched some of Silas last year. It's not that I wasn't impressed. You know, the reason why I think he fits so much into the Tristan Newton role is because if you watch Tristan at East Carolina, he was playing on a team that wasn't very good, and it was talented. I mean, they made the NCAA tournament and all that stuff, but it wasn't the type of team that you were like, oh, well, that guy stands out. And that's honestly why I'm not coaching in at this level, right? These guys targeted Silas. They wanted him because he fits the mold of exactly what they're looking for. A big guard, a volume shooter if you need it. So someone that can go get you a bucket if you need it and is not afraid of the moment, right? Shot almost 38% from three, was an 80% free throw shooter, has almost identical numbers to what Tristan Newton had in his first year with UConn, are coming over from East Carolina. 13.5 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, almost 2 steals a game. So the kid is physical. He can shoot. He can get downhill. He's a 3-level scorer. I just think, again, he's Tristan Newton with more athleticism and has that kind of defensive juice that, nothing to knock on Tristan. I don't think he was, Stephon Castle out there. He did okay, but I think he loves I think Hurley loves the competitiveness of Silas, and I think that makes that fit even more perfect than we even could think of based off of what he showed on the court in Georgia. So he had a breakout year his sophomore year. He was a kid who kind of exploded from that freshman to sophomore year. So we're getting him in that ascension, right? That prime of his college career, went from 3.1 points per game as a freshman to 14.5 as a sophomore, shot 41.4% from three last year. That would be the best in the Big East in top 30 nationally. Played all 35 games, second most minutes on the team, had 6 20-plus point performances and scored in double figures 32 times. He's your flamethrower, a guy who can bend the defense, space the floor. Look, he is the best piece they brought to the table. Now, another core piece is Malachi Smith from Dayton. Veteran guard, brings stability, court vision. If they couldn't land a guy like Silas, I would have zero issue with Malachi as your starting point guard. 86 career games, 77 starts. He's got a career average of almost 10 points a game and 5 assists, 38.8% from three, basically almost a 3-to-1 assist to turnover ratio if you round up. He ranked top 15 nationally in assist to turnover ratio late last season. He's not flashy, but he can be because he's a Bronx guy. He's a New York point guard, tough, veteran. Listen, steady guard play. That's what he brings. And he also brings the ability to, if he gets hot, he's very tough. He had some games last year with Dayton where he was their leading scorer on a team that had like a really heavy 3-guard rotation. I would not be surprised to see both Silas and Malachi on the court at the same time. But having a guy like this that you trust is an absolute phenomenal situation. And then when you think about it, you have a guy like Alec Millender, who, look, do I think that Alec is going to steal minutes away from some of the better players on this team that have a little more pedigree than him? No, but he's a redshirt senior. He's played Division II ball. He's played at a high level in Division I ball. And my thing is, he's just got a ton of experience. He's a redshirt senior. He can shoot it. He's shot at 46% from the floor last year, almost 44% from three. He led the Horizon League in assist to turnover ratio. If you're reading that and it sounds similar to Malachi Smith, that's also part of what Dan and his staff wanted to do. They wanted to bring in guys, seniors, and also players alike that value possession, that value the ball. And unfortunately, last year we didn't have that. You had Haas on one leg. You had Aidan Mahaney, who is not the best ball handler. You had a guy like Nowell who couldn't stay on the floor, injuries, whatnot. They ended up having to use Liam McNeely as a point forward. That's not what they want. They want guys like Braylon Mullins and Jacob Furphy and Jalen Storr and others, Eric Riba, to thrive without having to create their own offense. That's what the guard play is for. So it wouldn't surprise me if the rotation of Alec, Silas, Malachi is like a 3-headed monster at point guard, with Silas obviously garnering the majority of the minutes, Malachi getting more of the majority of 6-man minutes, and then potentially, running the second team. And then someone like Alec is insurance. He's a guy that you can bring off the bench like a Joey California or a Naheem Aleem and give you that instant offense if you need it, and also not turn the ball over. That's huge. Can provide offense, doesn't put you in a position where he gives the other team a chance to come back if you're leading. I think that's a huge difference in this team. It's something that they didn't have last year. Do you remember how many times they had moments where they were, to use an Evan Maya phrase, where they had a kill shot ready to go and they just couldn't get stops? They couldn't break through, and they just couldn't do it because they didn't have consistent offensive scores. They didn't have guys who consistently could put them in the best position to score the rock. They had people that were playing out of position. They had people that were trying to figure out new roles. And this year it's pretty cut and dry, which is a great thing for this squad. Yeah, I mean, like, there is not a position that I feel like, oh, well, you know, we're light on that. You know, and then another day we're going to talk about the front court, and maybe there is a need for another backup center. We'll talk about that. And I feel like what they're trying to do with this roster, they do have one more seat available. But as far as the guard play, which is what we're talking about today, you have a seasoned SEC guard who's going to start, score, defend. You have a returning sniper in Solo Ball who is an absolute monster and emerged to as a go-to guy and could be an All-American next year if he's put in that position. And then you have two, not just one, but two veteran point guards in Malachi Smith and Alec Millender to handle the rock, not turn the ball over, score when it's needed. It's a guard quartet, if you will. Without even getting into the freshmen of Braylon and Jacob, which we're going to do that in the next segment. And all of these six players, you have some really phenomenal layers, from scoring to point guards to guys who can get their own bucket to guys who are going to look to get other players involved. The upside is huge. So let's talk about what that ceiling looks like coming up after the break. You're on the Hoops Cap. All right, you're back on the Hoops Cap Pod, powered by Big East Energy Network. Go to BigEastEnergy.com. I think this shirt is available. Big East Energy. It's a nice one. If I didn't have a stain on the chest, I would puff it up a little more. But look, the ceiling of this team is 1,000% because of how good these guards are. I love Terrace Reed's potential. I love Eric Riba's promise. Even Dwayne Karama is a fantastic ad. Jalen Stewart, Jacob Ross, Jaden Ross. We can go into all of that another day. But these guards, you're adding Indiana's Mr. Basketball, a 5-star who is, by all intents and purposes, and we're going to have Adam Finkelstein in another time, from scouts that we trust and are aligned with, that these guys are not just ready to compete for minutes, but to come in and be dominant. The only person that I think I want to taper expectations on is Jacob Furphy, because there just isn't enough tape that would allow me to say this guy's going to do this next season. Braylon averaged 33 points a game, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, almost 4 steals as a senior. Shot almost 50% from 3. That's not a typo. He was the Gatorade Player of the Year. All-team leading scorer at Greenfield Central, was the MVP of Indiana versus Kentucky All-Star game, played with Indiana Elite. Do not let the All-American game fool you. That game was, every time Braylon touched the ball, he created a winning play, an assist. I think he had one turnover because when he caught the ball in the corner, his foot stepped out of bounds. That's it. Everything else, I think if you looked at that, he'd be like plus 10 from a plus-minus perspective. This is what Dan Hurley wants. He's got a absolute microwave of a scorer. He's confident. He's fearless. He's multi-level from everywhere. He's ready to compete. Don't be surprised if Hurley lets him loose early. If he dominates early, it wouldn't surprise me to have him be a starter. But he's not going to be on the bench a lot, guys. Like, it would take a monumental I wouldn't say collapse, but it would take a monumental disappointment for Dan Hurley to not look to get Braylon Mullins in either his starting lineup or first guy off the bench. And then you have this international wild card. We called him the Aussie Enigma because he's a long, skilled guard out of Australia's NBA Global Academy. He is already playing with their senior national team reps for the Boomers. He played in FIBA under 18 Asia Cup. He averaged almost 17 points a game and 5 rebounds, 2.5 assists, was 47% from 3 with that smooth lefty stroke. In the bronze under 20 nationals and gold at won a bronze at the under 20 nationals and a gold at the under 18 Asia Cup. He's an under 17 world champ. He is not, we had an interview with him. He is not the type of guy that's going to come in and be flashy. He's just smart, battle tested. Everyone's comparing his mentality to Cam Spencer, which is a great person to be compared to. But be wary of that, because I want Jacob to come in here and find his own identity. We can all say that Silas reminds us of Tristan, but I think Silas is going to make his own mark. I'm pointing out the fact that the height, the size, the physicality of this team is very similar to the 23-24 or 24-25 team minus Donovan Clingan. Just from a guard perspective, they're loaded, they're big. If they had this guard rotation last year against a team like St. John's, I think they beat them at home. The game that I was at, where they were up by, I think, 20 at one point, ended up losing that game because they just ran out of gas. And if you have 3, 4, or 5 guys who can handle the rock against that really big time pressure defense that they play, that like a Houston plays, I don't think a team can really wear on UConn like Florida did last year with this year's team. If that's the sense that we get, this team is headed for another potential Final Four and another national title. I'm not predicting number 7, but let's call it what is. Last year was kind of a patch-up job. This year, it's a complete system reboot. Veteran presence, explosive returning scorer, explosive proven leadership in Alex Caravan, explosive potential first-team All-Big East center in Terrace Reed Jr., elite freshman scorer, international upside, and a bunch of just veterans around every position. Like you have an Alex, and then you have Dwayne Karama, who's a I think a redshirt junior, but you have a redshirt senior in Alec Millender, who if somebody ever gets hurt, he steps right in because he has that experience. If the chemistry of this team comes together, this team has the tools, toughness to make another run in March, and it all starts with these guards, and it all starts here. All right, that's been another episode of the Hoops Cat Pod. As always, go Huskies. We're out.
Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it. Yeah. UConn, baby. Home of the champions.